But he also felt a crushing sense of failure. He should have been there for her, a shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen. But he had been too consumed by his own demons to see her pain, to hear her silent cries for help. The fact that April had confided in Ross Barton, a man who had his own share of struggles, was a bitter pill to swallow. Not that he begrudged Ross's support. He knew that April needed someone to lean on, but the fact that she had turned to Ross instead of him felt like a betrayal, a confirmation of his worst fears. He had failed her, he had not been the father she needed, the confidence she craved. "I've let her down again," Marlon confessed to Rona, his voice thick with emotion. "She needed to talk and I wasn't there for her. She's never going to trust me again." His words were laced with self-pity, but also with a genuine anguish. He was lost adrift in a sea of guilt and regret, unsure of how to navigate the treacherous waters of his relationship with his daughter. Rona's words offered a glimmer of hope, a lifeline in the darkness. "That's not true," she reassured him. "I know you're disappointed that she didn't open up to you, but she's talking, Marlon, and that's a good thing." Her words were a gentle reminder that communication, even with someone else, was a step in the right direction. It was a sign that April was reaching out, that she was not completely closed off. But Rona's optimism couldn't completely dispel Marlon's doubts. He knew that rebuilding trust would be a long and arduous journey. He knew that he would have to earn back April's trust, slowly and patiently, brick by brick. He would have to learn to listen, truly listen, to her fears and her pain. He would have to let go of his own insecurities and be the father she needed him to be. The road ahead was daunting, filled with uncertainty and challenges, but Marlon knew that he had to try. He had to find a way to connect with April, to bridge the gap that had grown between them. He had to show her that he was there for her, that he loved her unconditionally, and that he would never let her down again. The silence that had enveloped their home was a suffocating weight, a constant reminder of the distance between them. Marlon knew that he had to break that silence, to find the words that would heal their fractured relationship. He had to find his voice, not just as a father, but as a man who had finally understood the true meaning of love and forgiveness. The journey would be long and difficult, but for April, he would walk through fire. He would do anything to earn back her trust, to mend her broken heart, and to rebuild the shattered pieces of their family. The silence had to end. He had to speak. He had to listen. He had to heal. The unspoken grief, Marlon and April's heartbreaking journey in Emmerdale. The quiet hum of rural life in Emmerdale has been shattered once again, this time by the return of April Windsor, a young girl carrying the weight of the world on her slender shoulders. Her recent disappearance over Christmas, a desperate flight from a home she no longer felt she belonged in, has unearthed a well of unspoken grief and fractured relationships, leaving her father, Marlon Dingle, grappling with his own inadequacies and the fear of losing his daughter's trust forever. Friday's episode served as a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between parental support and the need for space, a balance Marlon is struggling to find. April's return has been handled with kid gloves by her family, each step carefully measured, each word cautiously chosen. The police's involvement earlier in the week brought her back into the fold, but the underlying issues that drove her to run away remain, festering beneath the surface of their fragile reunion. Marlon, a father wrestling with his own demons, has adopted a strategy of passive waiting, believing that April will confide in him when she's ready. He expressed his intention to Bob Hope, explaining his desire to avoid overwhelming April with questions about her harrowing experience living on the streets. Bob, ever the voice of reason, gently questioned the wisdom of this approach, hinting at the potential dangers of leaving April to navigate her trauma alone. Marlon's hesitation underscores his own insecurities as a parent. He's a man who wears his heart on his sleeve, yet he often struggles to express his emotions, a trait that has undoubtedly contributed to the growing distance between him and April. He fears that pushing her too hard will only drive her further away, but his passive approach risks leaving her feeling abandoned and unheard. This delicate dance between giving space and offering support is a tightrope walk for any parent, and for Marlon, burdened by his own past struggles, it feels particularly precarious. Emmerdale spoilers follow from Friday's episode, February 7, which is available to watch now on streaming service ITVX, but hasn't yet aired on ITV1. Note, this article discusses the loss of a child. Emmerdale has aired another sad update for Marlon Dingle and April Windsor's return. April's worried father was left upset in Friday's episode as she fell straight back into old habits, leaning on Ross Barton for support rather than him. The teenager's family have been treading carefully with their approach since the police tracked her down earlier this week. April ran away from home at Christmas and has since revealed several reasons why she felt pushed into making this decision. In Friday's episode, April's family welcomed her home following her brief stay in hospital. Marlon told Bob Hope that he didn't intend to ask April too many questions about her weeks living on the streets. The struggling dad felt it was best to wait until April approached him to talk, although Bob questioned whether this was really such a good idea after everything she'd been through. With Marlon hesitating, it was Ross who ultimately stepped in to speak to April after they crossed paths at the grave of her mum Donna. April confided in Ross about her pregnancy and stillbirth, once again confirming that the baby's father was a random lad she met at a party. Later, Ross brought April back home and revealed that she had an honest conversation with him. The news plunged Marlon into fresh despair as he regretted not being the person who April could talk to. Marlon said, "I've let her down again. She needed to talk and I wasn't there for her. She's never going to trust me again." Marlon's wife Rona replied, "That's not true. I know you're disappointed that she didn't open up to you, but she's talking, Marlon, and that's a good thing." Can Marlon and April work to get their relationship back on track? The crushing weight of silence, Marlon's heartbreak and April's return in Emmerdale. The quiet hum of a Yorkshire morning offered little solace to Marlon Dingle. The air, crisp and carrying the scent of damp earth, seemed to mock the turmoil brewing within him. His daughter, April, was home, a fragile bird returned to its nest after a harrowing flight. But the relief of her safe return was a bittersweet melody, laced with the sharp discord of his own inadequacy. April's recent disappearance, a desperate cry for help, had ripped open old wounds and exposed the raw, festering pain of loss that Marlon had tried so desperately to bury. And now, as she settled back into the familiar rhythms of their home, a new fear gnawed at him, the fear that he had irrevocably failed her. April's return was not the joyous reunion Marlon had yearned for. The festive cheer of Christmas, a time meant for family and togetherness, had been shattered by her sudden absence. The frantic search, the agonizing uncertainty, the gnawing fear that he might never see his little girl again. These were the memories that haunted him now, casting a long shadow over their fragile reconciliation. He had longed to wrap her in his arms, to smother her with reassurances and apologies, but the words caught in his throat, choked by the weight of his own guilt. He watched her, a silent observer in his own home, as she navigated the familiar spaces with a newfound hesitancy. Her eyes, once bright and full of mischief, now held a haunted, distant look. She moved like a ghost, a pale imitation of the vibrant, spirited girl he knew. The laughter that once filled their home was replaced by an unsettling quiet, a silence that screamed louder than any argument. Marlon's heart ached with a familiar pang, a dull throb that resonated with the memory of Donna, April's mother. The pain of losing Donna, a wound that had never fully healed, was now reopened, bleeding afresh with the added agony of his daughter's distress. He saw Donna in April's eyes, a fleeting echo of her mother's strength and vulnerability, and the sight only deepened his despair. He felt like he was failing them both, trapped in a cycle of grief and regret. He had tried to be strong for April, to be the rock she needed in the storm, but his own grief, his own insecurities, kept undermining him. He had retreated into himself, building walls around his heart, convinced that he was protecting her from his own pain. But in doing so, he had inadvertently pushed her away, creating a chasm of silence that now seemed impossible to bridge. The revelation of April's pregnancy and stillbirth was a devastating blow. The news hit Marlon with the force of a physical blow, leaving him gasping for air. He had known that something was deeply troubling her, but he could never have imagined the depth of her pain. The thought of his young daughter carrying such a heavy burden of loss was unbearable. He felt a surge of protectiveness, a desperate urge to shield her from further suffering.